Hey fam, Kaya here. Shalom, shalom. It is a beautiful morning and I am ready to jump back in to continue the series, The Image of God, the Image of the Beast, Man, and the Condition of Society. But there's two things I want to say before I get into that. Number one, I'm going to be given a little bit of historical context to when this would have taken place. And I think it's really important because I'm going to be talking about the ancient Near East and where a lot of these different cultures were located. And as I'm talking about this, I don't want to give the impression when I say the ancient Near East that these are the people who are in what we call the Near East today. The first thing that we need to understand is that that region, the East, the Middle East, the Near East, the Far East, these were geopolitical terms that were placed on these regions. I believe it was by the British. Don't quote me, but I believe it was the British who did it, and it had to do with their trade. So but it was based on their own orientation. Where were they geographically? And so you had cultures that were in the Near East, you had cultures that were in the Far East, and so that was more why that was called that. But those were really terms that kind of stuck, and even the term Middle East is in the 1800s. I believe it was like 1836 or it's somewhere around there in the 1800s. I don't know the exact year, but these were terms that were actually placed on these regions. And so for whatever political purpose they were placed on those regions, these were names that stuck. And but it doesn't allude to the geographical truth. So that may be a geopolitical term, but it's not really geographical truth, because even when we think about what some people consider, or where they consider the nation of Israel to be, that is really attached more to mainland Africa. And so geographically, it is on the tectonic plate, on the African tectonic plate. So it is not something that is somewhere else. And many times the implication is that's somewhere else, that Egypt is somewhere else, when those regions, they're not somewhere else. They're actually on the African continent. So when I talk about the ancient Near East today, I want us to get a picture of what that was like. Also, I found a video, I'm going to put it down in the description box. It's a guy from Iran, which is about where this probably would have taken place, modern day Iran, somewhere around the Persian Gulf, just north of the Syrian desert. But he did a video on Black Arabs, Assyrians, Elamites, Persians, and Hebrews. And of course, in his comments, he got some backlash, because there are just people who just simply don't want to accept it. But he brought out some really interesting points, some points that I had been thinking about for years, to be honest with you. One of the points that he brought out was from his own perspective, in terms of he's living there. He's an Iranian, and he believes that that they are not the original peoples, but 2,000 years ago there were different peoples, and what he called them was all different kinds of black people, which is basically what he said. The other thing he brought out was some scientific truth, and it's only 6 minutes long, so I would encourage you to go look at it. He said even their people, where the people who are in those regions today, he said we don't even go out that much in the summertime, because it gets up to be 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which I believe was 50 degrees Celsius. He did it in Celsius, but I looked it up and it's like 122 degrees. And so just scientific truth that you would have to have a great deal of melanin in your skin to be able to survive in those regions. And so there's no way that even, they try to make it today where these were Caucasian people, or these were white people who were the original inhabitants of North Africa and what they call the Middle East. That it's not even scientifically possible, because they would have never made it. Everybody would have died, because they just wouldn't have been able to survive. It's just where there's the sun is very hot, where it's very direct, where you have high rays of UV. It is you just need a great deal of melanin to survive in those regions, and you would not be able to do that if your skin was more pale. That just would not happen. So I don't want to take this video in that direction. That's not where I'm trying to go with this, and it's certainly not something that I'm trying to put anybody down or anything like that. It's more just trying to bring out historical truth and fact that the peoples in those regions, the Syrians, the Elamites, all those people, they didn't look like the people look today. And a lot of there was a lot of movement, and then you had people, colonizers coming in, and, things happening with the women, and you just have a whole different look to what that region is today. So I found it really interesting, and if you get a chance, I put it down in the description box. Just take a look at it, because I thought it was really interesting. So what I want to do is go ahead and jump into what I want to talk about today. Now, when we think about this region of the ancient Near East, where all this would have happened, the cultures of this region had a very different idea of the concept of name. It's not the same that we have today. Today, I would say name is more of a modern abstraction. And what I mean when I say a modern abstraction is it doesn't really, it's not represented by any type of characteristic or quality, or it's not embodied by anything. It's not it doesn't have a representational quality to it. Many times when we say the name of something, even today, many of us I use the term many times YHWH, some people Yahusha, Yeshua. There's a lot of different names that people will use to refer to the Messiah, and we even hear the name Jesus. But in the Christian school of thought, it's changing. I will say it's changing. It is definitely changing, but historically, it's been this whole idea that you just say the name, like Jesus. It's just a name, and that name by itself. And don't stone me for this, but the name by itself carries some kind of power just by itself. When there were many individuals with that name, it was a very common name. And so there would have had to be something different about the man who bore the name that determined the power that it actually carried. So when we talk about name, we're actually talking less about a word that was spoken and more about the character that it embodied. Even if we were to look up name in the Strong's Concordance, it is Shem. It is H8034. If you want to look that up, it would be great, because it is associated with character. As a matter of fact, you'll see the word character, renown, fame, famous, authority, glory, reputation. It's more of what that name embodied and what people saw that it will be recognized by, how it will be recognized, rather than a word that was spoken. And this is the way that the ancients understood name at that time, around the 2nd century BCE, about 2,000 years before the Messiah, in that part of the world. So I am going to go ahead and start today by reading Genesis 12, verses 1 through 5. And again, this is going to be in a couple of parts, because I want to make sure that I can get it in. And if if you're doing something, you're driving to work or cleaning the house or something, it's not something that's going to last a really long time. Yahweh said to Abram, "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house for a country which I will show you. And I shall make you a great nation. I shall bless you and make your name famous. You are to be a blessing. I shall bless those who bless you, and shall curse those who curse you. And all the clans of the earth shall bless themselves by you." Remember that, because that's going to be important. All the clans of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So Abram went as Yahweh told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all they had amassed, and the people they had acquired in Haran. They set off for the land of Canaan and arrived there. So I'm going to jump back up real quick here to verses 2 and 3. "And I shall make you a great nation, and shall bless you and make your name famous. You are to be a blessing." Some translations, in fact, most of them say, "I'm going to make your name great." Again, going back to that word name, they understood it very, very differently. And it was more connected to something that you could actually, I'll connect to even with your physical senses, in the sense that it was something that you would see. It was a character that was embodied. So when he told Abraham, "I'm going to make your name great," it wasn't so much the word Abraham or the name Abraham in that way, though that was a part of it. But that wasn't, if we just think about it in that way and leave it there, start with Abraham, end with Abraham, then we miss the whole meaning, because that's not the way that even Abraham himself would have understood this, and certainly not the early hearers. And this is why that it was written the way that it was. When he said, "I'm going to make your name great, Abraham," or Abram, what he was saying is this way of life, this consciousness, this character that you are learning, that you are transitioning into, that is transforming you, that you are becoming. It is this way of life that begins with loving God and, and loving others, and is encapsulated in that. It is this that I'm going to make great, because it was this consciousness, this way of being and knowing, that started in the garden, that was supposed to be, what it was when the Most High told Adam and Eve to, rule and to take dominion and to spread out. It was in the same character. It was in the same consciousness. It was in the same way of being. And unfortunately, it was a failure. So this is now the Most High once again trying to reinstate that, or reestablish that in this man, who was going to hopefully be transitioned or passed on to his family, seen in Isaac, seen in Jacob, then the children of Jacob, Jacob's sons, and then hopefully this consciousness in the nation of Israel. And this is what he meant when he said, I'm going to make your name great, because it was this way of life, this way of being, this way of knowing that he was making great. It is as though when you had those who would come in contact with Israel, because he said here that I shall bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and all the clans of the earth shall bless themselves by you. And I think that is a way that's really a powerful way to put it, because whereas many other translations will say that other nations will be blessed in you or by you, it's almost like they're waiting for something to happen so that then they can be blessed. But when it's worded this way, it almost makes other nations partners with Israel, partners with Abraham. So, for example, other nations, strangers that we'll think about, who would have come in contact with Israel. When they came in contact with Israel, they should have seen a very different way of life, a very different way that the Israelites lived amongst each other, that they treated each other. And this was really all based on their commitment to the Most High and their relationship to Him. And so when they experienced how different it was in the nation of Israel, and how free they were in the nation of Israel, that they were not oppressed, that people were taken care of, when they saw this and experienced this, then they were experiencing the character of the Most High. They were experiencing this name, as it were, that the Most High was making great. And so as they would have taken this onto themselves, not all strangers, but some of them, the ones who assimilated into Israelite culture, and the ones who assimilated and were able to take the Passover, because not all strangers were, only some of them were, but the ones who actually assimilated in, and like Ruth said, your people are my people, your God is my God, and I am completely throwing away the culture that I came from, and I am totally embracing becoming as one of you. The ones who did that were, and the nations who would have attached themselves, it is in that way that they would have taken on the way of Abraham, that they would have blessed themselves by Abraham. So it makes them more of a player, and it actually makes it more personal. And we can even see today in our own lives that if we understand it that way, that this is really something that's supposed to take place in the context of community, us amongst each other, not fighting with each other, not gossiping about each other, not talking about each other, not having crazy relationships with each other. But if we understand what that name actually meant, and that we're to embody that in our person and in the context of community, which is really where you would see it, it would change the whole way that we think about things, and hopefully the way that we even live our own lives. It would change our mindset, our attitude, the way we do things. We would no longer cheat each other and try to oppress each other and do a lot of the things that we do. We would change it, because then we're understanding it the way that Abraham would have understood it, the way the early hearers would have understood it. So this is so important that we understand that name is not a modern abstraction that has no representational qualities. It is literally an ancient reality, and to the ancients, it was literally the reality of something that was seen and experienced. I am going to read just a little note, and this is really based on Genesis 12:2. It's just a little thing that I wrote up, and it's grasping the fuller meaning, and it really just kind of brings all this together, this aspect of the heart, God's heart, that I feel like that maybe He is emphasizing just this piece. There's a lot of things I'm going to pull out of this, but this is just one thing I want to talk about in this particular video. Today, the idea of name is a modern abstraction, but in the world of the 2nd century BCE, it was an ancient reality. In the ancient Near East, the concept of name was not so much a word that was spoken as much as it was a character that was embodied. When YHWH told Abraham, I will make your name great, he was describing a mentality, a character, a way of being, a way of existing in the world, a way of responding to the world, a way of knowing the world that was founded upon loving God and loving others. First seen in the life of Abraham, because again, it was lost in the garden. This mentality was to be the heart of the family, of Abraham's family, Isaac, Jacob, this whole extension, and ultimately expressed in the consciousness of the nation of Israel. And that is what the law was all about. And I'll go into that at some point, because I feel like we have this whole twisted idea of what the law of the Most High actually was. It was inclusive of so many things, and it was a covenant of mercy. Whereas a lot of people will, have the idea that it wasn't, and that it wasn't merciful, and that the Most High that like people just died. People did die, but it wasn't in the way that we think. It was a type of mercy that was extended. And when I say it wasn't in the way that we think, it wasn't like somebody did something and oh, you died. You did something and oh, you died. That if we go back and actually look at it, it wasn't like that at all. And if we actually even look at the way that the Israelites themselves regarded it in their own writings, it was always something that was merciful. And this is why Paul even said the law is good. The law is spiritual. And so I want to do something on that as I'm doing this whole series, because when we think about what was given to them, what the Most High gave from Mount Sinai, what he gave our forefathers to live by, this would have been this embodiment of this name. So we know that Abraham followed the law, statutes, and commands, because it actually says that. I believe it's in Genesis chapter 26. And I can give you the specific one and put it in the description box once I'm done recording, and then I upload this. I'll go and make sure that I find out where that's at and put that in the description box. But we know that Abraham did, and we know that it wasn't maybe the law that as like it was given, but Abraham had a sense of something. And whatever he had a sense of was seen in his family, and then also seen, in the nation of Israel, and should have been seen as they were establishing this government that the Most High wanted to spread over the nation of the face of the earth, and have all the nations be blessed by it, because in the end it was going to be for all man to be blessed, not just the nation of Israel. And we can see that from the very beginning. So that is something that is imperative that we remember. The other thing that I want to share really quickly is I want to share a little excerpt from a book called The Ancient Near Eastern Thought and the Old Testament, Introducing the Conceptual World of the Hebrew Bible. So I'm going to read one excerpt right now, and then in the next video I'm going to read another excerpt and a couple of other things I want to share, because we're really getting close to that 20-minute mark, and I want to kind of keep it short. But here it says on page 61, in the ancient world, something came into existence when it was separated out and given a name. And I want to stop right there, because again, in the ancient Near East, the way that they understood name was very different from the way that we understand name today. As a matter of fact, the way that something existed is if it was given a name. And if it wasn't given a name, if it didn't have a function, if it didn't have a purpose, then it didn't exist. It had to have a role that it fulfilled. And this is the way that they understood deities. The way they understood a god or a deity was not just that it was a god or a deity. There was some kind of role the god played. There was some purpose that god fulfilled. And they could see it in physical phenomena. They could see it in cosmic, I'll say, phenomena, things in action, things that were taking place. And if they didn't see that, then the god wasn't given a name and the god did not exist. So we understand now to some degree why Genesis was written the way that it was, why from the very beginning there's this flurry of action. The Most High said, let there be light, and there was light. And so we see this cosmic phenomena start to take place, and this was how they would have understood or recognized the Most High for who he was, and some of his attributes, some of his characters, some of his, not characters, some of his character, his attributes, who he was. This is part of how they would have known him. And Genesis, particularly the creation, is really a story where the Most High is really revealing himself and making himself known through this cosmic phenomenon. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. Again, in the next video, it's going to be part 2 of the concept of name, an ancient, a modern abstraction, or an ancient reality, because I want to finish up this just idea of name. It is so important that we understand how the ancients would have understood it, because when we understand it the way they understood it, then it doesn't just deepen our own knowledge, but we then can take that truth and apply it to our lives in a way that makes sense. Apply it to our lives in a way that is more purposeful, in a way that is more that is practical, and a way that is just going to be more beneficial to us, because we are not misconstruing the message that was actually intended when it was given to the early hearers, to the early listeners. So I'm going to stop right there, wrap this up. I'm going to say shalom. May the Most High bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May he be good to you. May he grant you wisdom and peace. May he meet all of your needs. And with that, I'm going to say just have a beautiful day, and I will see you in the next video, part 2, the concept of name and modern abstraction or an ancient reality. Have a wonderful day. Shalom.